Hello, and welcome to another episode of the M42 podcast. I am your host, Rick Trimmer, and today we are going to continue our hunting stories episode. So this is the second episode of our hunting stories. This is going to be with our special guest, Michael Scrogan, who actually has his own podcast called Hunting Stories Podcast. And you can also find him on Instagram at huntingstories_official. So we're going to jump into some fun stories. He just actually went to Hawaii with me on our week-long bow hunting axis hunt and had an awesome time. And we're going to bring up some of those stories and go over some of the different stories that we've made along the way in hunting. So hope you enjoy this one. It's a good time, some pretty funny stuff, and let's jump into this. Man, how have you been?
I can't complain. I always have the post-hunt blues, but, that's just the nature of the beast. You have too much fun out there, right?
Absolutely, dude. That was a blast, man. That was, that was cool. I was ready to come home, after 2 weeks, just missing the family. But yeah, then I get home and I'm like, I kind of want to go back now. So it happens
Right.
pretty quick, it happens pretty quick. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm like, I need to talk to my boys. Like, I'm just sitting here with my kids and my wife. I'm like, I love them, but gotta talk to the boys.
Absolutely. So you're in Colorado, right? You're in,
I am.
Where are you at?
I am. I'm just east of Boulder. I don't know how familiar you are with the area, man, but a little town called
Boulder,
Erie.
north of Denver?
Northwest, yeah. Boulder's tucked up right on the mountains and probably
Okay.
about 30 minutes northwest of Denver. And so I'm
Okay.
10 minutes east of there.
Okay. So
Cool.
yeah, man, good to chat with you. So we met, like 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago now is when we first met, through Colin. Right?
Yeah. Yeah, we've been talking for a while. At this point, we had a couple phone calls, a bunch of texts, but yeah, we met June 1st, I guess. Yeah, he picked me up at the airport.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and I love that. I love that you, like I heard some of the guys talking to you when I was in my room, and you were out there talking to Ben in Hawaii, and you were saying how, you just came in last minute, and there was an opportunity. One of the guys had to bail out, and you jumped on it. You don't know anybody there. I think that intimidates so many people, and I think that's what we respected a lot about you was you're like, hey man, I'm in. Let's go, and jumped in on it.
Yeah, it's it's actually something that's pretty familiar to me. Being from Boulder, right? I when I started hunting, I knew more vegans than I did hunters.
Oh yeah.
I was like, man, I gotta fix this problem. So
Yeah.
like my first turkey hunt, I just went on Facebook and I was like, hey, I'm looking for a turkey mentor. You don't have to take me. I just want to ask you questions. The guy ended up letting me stay at his house for a week-long turkey hunt out in Rifle, Colorado.
Wow.
When I switched to archery, same thing, man. I was just like, my wife doesn't want me to go alone. I mean, I'm willing to, but just to make the wife happy, I'll take somebody with me. So I, again, went on a hunting Facebook group and was like, gentlemen, I need a hunting buddy. Wife doesn't want me to run out into the woods, break an ankle, and die. So if anyone wants to go, and I ended up going out with like 6 Army guys.
That's right.
It was a shit show of a hunt, to be completely honest. We were always together all the time. There was way too many of us. So we saw a couple elk, but either way, it was a really fun time.
Hard to sneak up on an elk with 6 of you.
Exactly, yeah. But it was a lot of fun. But yeah, it's just I realized that like hunting itself makes me really uncomfortable. And it always has, like, going out in the middle of the night. I hate that. But
do you? Yeah,
you gotta get through it.
Yeah.
But if that's the hardest thing that I got to do is to just talk to some people I haven't met before, that's easy stuff compared to the rest of the things that hunting's going to put in front of you.
I think that's the harder part for most people. I think most people are nervous about looking like an idiot or not having, the knowledge that these other guys have or the same equipment. And, I think that's what's harder for most people to overcome. And so I just applaud you on that for coming out with us. What were we there with 6, 7 other guys? You jumped in and fit right in and cooking and being a part of the team and so I just wanted to say that I think that was cool of you to do that. I'm glad that that's not difficult for you because I think that's a huge attribute for you.
Yeah, well, it didn't hurt that you assembled a pretty great group of guys, right? It was pretty. I walked in and everybody in open arms, just ready to have some fun and get out there and chase some axis deer. So,
and I think that's
kudos to you for assembling that crew.
I appreciate that, man. Yeah, that was Ryan Mickler. He started that off, and then I just kind of took it over because he I don't know how that actually happened. He kind of pulled a little fast one on me, but the first year he invited me out, and I was the same way, man. Same exact way. I hadn't bow hunted for like 10 years. Did it back in the day and just got frustrated with it. My last story of bow hunting was pretty funny. But I actually threw my bow as hard as I could throw it out hunting, just chucked it like 100 feet, whatever it was. I just threw my bow and said, I'm done with this stupid sport. And hadn't picked it up for like a decade. And then Ryan called and he says, hey man, I know you used to bow hunt or something. You hunt? Do you want to come out? And I got 7 or 8 guys going to Hawaii, same hunt. And one of the guys couldn't make it and we got a spot open. And it was like on Ryan style. It was like the week before. And I had plans to fly to Alaska with my entire family up there for a month. And I talked to my wife and says, hey man, Ryan runs around with some really cool guys. I'd like to jump in on this. It cost me a few $1,000 to rearrange my other trip. And I rerouted to Hawaii for a week at that time. I just did a week the first time and didn't know a single person. And again, like you said, it's easy for me. I just kind of hop right in and start making friendships right away. And that's what I think people don't realize is, and in any sport, it's not even hunting, from anything I've ever seen, if you have somebody in mountain biking or you have somebody in, skiing and you want to get into it, if you just go find that community, like you said, online is so easy nowadays, and just start asking questions. Most people want to share what they love with other people.
Yeah.
And so
I'll mention this about online real quick, Rick. When I posted those things about the turkey hunting and the archery hunting, I had a lot of people reach out. It wasn't just like one group and I was like, hey, please let me tag along or please let me help you. It was like, okay, let's start looking into these people and find which ones I feel are, either the most confident about having success or the least creepy, because there's some creepy people that reach out to me and I was like, I'm not quite sure if I want to go into the woods with you alone. But yeah, I mean, there's tons of people out there looking to help. So.
That's awesome. Yeah, how long have you been hunting? I didn't ask you that in Hawaii. Have you been doing this your whole life?
No, man, I've just picked it up. I started hunting. My brother-in-law and my father-in-law were hunters. Not big hunters. They just enjoyed an elk hunt every other year or something like that.
Are you from Colorado?
I was born here, but I've lived all over the place. New Jersey, Oregon, New Mexico, Washington,
you grew up in a
Texas.
State that hunts, though. I mean, there's a lot of hunters around.
Well, yeah, but not in my circle. So I didn't start hunting until I was 32. Yeah, and so my father-in-law and brother-in-law were into it. My wife was like, you should go with them. And I'm like, all right, to be part of the family, I'll go. Plus, I was, when you hit 30 as a male, you either get into like war history or smoked meats. And so I was really into smoked meats. And I was like, all right, if I'm going to eat all this meat, I should probably like harvest an animal at some point. See what that feels like. Otherwise, I should probably cut back on the consumption. So I went, and it was a camp more about beer. And no one really knew what they were doing, but we'd go out and we'd have fun. We had a wall tent, we've had some great times. But I really didn't like it. Like, I go back to being in the dark. Like, they're like, here, walk a mile down this dirt road in the dark in Washington, which is where I started hunting. And then there's a field there. We call that Bear Field. Just sit there until the sun comes up. And I'm like, are you kidding me right now? You want me to go sit why is it called Bear Field? They're like, well, there's an apple orchard and there's always bear shit everywhere. And I'm like, I'm out alone. Yeah.
I'll wait till daylight.
And here's actually a funny story. So the very first morning I went out with my father-in-law. I'm sitting there in the brush. We go in with red lights. I don't know what I'm doing, but the sun starts to come up, and all of a sudden I hear something moving. And I look to my side where my father-in-law was, because that's where I hear it. He's belly crawling through the grass, just taking photos of me. This is commemorating the moment. And I'm like, I don't feel like this is what we should be doing for hunting. But he called himself the Great White Hunter because he's from Canada. And so I was like, if this is what he says we should be doing, then this is what we should be doing. So but yeah, that was about 8-9 years ago. Didn't see success that year. Didn't even. I was like, muzzleloader actually.
Okay.
Yeah, and
that's
then
what I shot this elk with last year was my muzzleloader.
That's a good looking elk, man.
Yeah, I had him put the horns into the ceiling because it was too tall.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. I shot an archery elk last year. I'm gonna get that back from my taxidermist within the next like 3 weeks. So I can't wait.
Yeah, I saw the picture. It's amazing.
Yeah. But yeah, so did that. My second year, we got into, we actually drew a tag as a group. And so we all had bull tags. So in Washington, we were just hunting spikes initially. But we had bull tags and we got into them. I could tell you the full story if you want, but basically bugling bulls, battling it out, running in front of us, just like chaos, elk everywhere. I was hooked, and I was like, this is my personality now. Like, this is what I'm gonna do. Eventually moved back to Colorado, and to get a tag, I had to hunt like late November, and I was like, this sucks. I don't like hunting in late November. So I
Yeah.
literally picked up a bow just so I could hunt in September, just
Hmm.
for weather purposes,
Interesting. Yeah.
and completely fell in love with it. So I started doing 3D archery, and I shoot as much as I can. Haven't
Yeah.
been recently, but I just love the archery aspect of it and getting out there.
Well, and you're good, man. Like I said, you came out to Hawaii and killed a brute first year. Everybody was, Ryan's been what? I think this was his third or fourth year and hasn't killed a buck, you know?
Huh.
And it's a hard, you were out there. I mean, it's hard, man. They're wily little buggers. And unless, one just makes a mistake and, comes into water or stops for a second in front of you, it's a hard hunt. It's a hard animal to get.
It
And
is.
so
It is.
when you sent that picture around that morning, we were just so excited, and everybody behind your back was just like, bro, he has no idea how hard that is to do. He's going to come out here and be like, yeah, it's pretty easy. That was kind of easy.
It was not easy, man.
But it wasn't. Yeah.
That first morning, I was like, oh, this is easy, because there were deer everywhere, right?
That's
And
the hard
then
part. Yeah.
someone's like, hey, some deer coming your way, and I see them at 80 yards. I'm getting ready to take my shot, and I'm in the pipes, right? So I'm crawling between the pipes to try and get
I
closer
love that
to
you
them.
know the names now. When we first pulled up, we're like, should we put them in the hole or should we put them in the pipes or should we put them at the
Yeah.
four-way? And you guys are like, dude, this is hilarious. Red light, the wall. And then at the
Yeah.
end, you guys are like, I'm going to go sit by the pipes. You go in the hole. And I'm like, it's just funny how after a week, you just get because we just made up names, but
Yep. It's
That
funny
makes sense.
when you're like, you sit the pipes. I'm like, well, how am I going to know that I'm in the right spot? And you're like, you'll know. And then we get there, and I'm like, oh, there's like 500
10
metal
foot tall,
pipes stacked
10
on
foot
top of
tall
each other.
pipes in the middle of a field. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But yeah, those deer, they were at 80 yards, and then you guys were like, oh, you're just gonna have to shoot at them running. That's just they just keep moving, and they come to like 40 yards, and they just stop, and I'm like,
That was
well,
unbelievable.
I was like, hot damn. So I pull back, and I use the wrong pin, right? And I just fire an arrow right underneath the doe, complete miss, no blood, no nothing. They run off, and I'm like, I don't. And I'm sitting there for another 2 hours waiting for everyone else to wrap up their morning hunts, and I'm like, I'm not gonna get a better shot than that.
Yeah.
I was like, that might have been my entire trip. I might have just blown it.
That's
like,
a
if
good
I
one.
can't shoot one at 40 standing there, then what am I doing here? And I think it was just excitement. I've been elk hunting for years. I've shot one arrow.
Yeah.
And to like the first 15 minutes of my first hunt in Molokai, I'm flinging an arrow. I was like, oh God, that's it. I just lost my one opportunity. But fortunately, I had plenty more. I think
20
I
minutes
lost,
later, another group
I
comes
lost
in.
10 arrows. Yeah.
Yeah. It's unbelievable, and that's what we tell people. We had Kip there, Kip Sorensen, for his first ever hunt. Seth Studley, his second ever hunt, which he came last year for his first hunt. And that's what's beautiful about that hunt is you can go out there in a week and, get just, years of experience.
Oh, yeah.
People don't realize, people who have never bow hunted, they don't understand what it takes to get 30 to 50 yards from an animal that is trying to survive, especially in Hawaii where you have hundreds of them in a group, 20 to 40 to,
A lot of eyes.
I've seen a couple hundred at a time. A lot of eyes and ears that are trying to just survive, and they're so jumpy. These things have been around tigers, so their genetics are just, predisposed to just be, on edge.
Yep.
And people don't understand, I think they have a concept, but until you're out there and like you said, my wife, I actually sent her a video when I was there of a couple does and fawns that were drinking out of a water hole. And I said, hey, look at this. We were on FaceTime, and I said, look at these deer right here. And she says, why aren't you shooting, And I'm like, they got fawns. I've got a few does down. I don't want to shoot one with a fawn. And she says, could you shoot those? And I says, no, I couldn't right now. They're already in here. I couldn't draw. And she didn't understand what that meant. She's like, what do you mean?
Yeah.
You just shoot them, And I'm like, no, you have to get your arm, you have to put an arrow on, and you have to go like this. And that movement, they're like, and they're gone,
Yep.
And people don't understand all these different little things that can happen. Your arrow bounces on your rest. You turn
rattle.
your foot
I hate that rattle.
wrong. Yeah, you turn your
Yep.
foot wrong, and the dirt snaps. Break a little branch or something. So, but that's what we love about it, right? That's with a gun. I have a lot of friends getting it, and which I think is way cool, but I have a lot of friends getting into like long range hunting. You know, they want to
Yeah.
shoot 500 yards plus, which is another cool thing. But for me, it's just a wild thing to have a deer. You know, my dad shot a buck on the final day after you guys had left. We brought in another group, and my dad on the last day shot a really nice buck as well, and it was at 20 feet. And my dad's 71 years old. This is his third year out there. Never killed a buck either. And he actually, on the way to his stand, he got a flat tire. Pretty funny, but he drops me off and calls me about 3 minutes later, and I'm like, what the hell? I'm walking in the dark, and I'm like, why is he calling you? He's 71 years old, so I'm like, oh great, is he having a heart attack or something? So I answer him like, hello, what's up? And he's like, hey, I just got a flat tire. I don't know what I hit, but I'm gonna park it right here and walk down to my stand. And his stand's like a mile away. So anyway, he goes down there, kills a buck, texts me, says, I got one. I says, holy cow, it was a brute, big old wide one. And I says, I'll head your way. I'll go grab the truck. So I walk over to the truck, and there's a huge root ball, just a big old chunk of log. And he's like, I don't know what I hit. And I'm like, maybe the tree, I says, how do you know how you hit it? Like, how did you even, it's off the road. And he says, oh, I saw some eyes in the headlights and thought I'd try to turn and see what they were, and ran over the stump. But anyway,
okay, that makes a little bit of sense.
Yeah. I was over there, yeah, changing the tire about 45 minutes after I'd text him, and he says, hey, do you need help? And I says, no, I'm good. And he says, okay, because I'm still sitting here in the stand just shaking like a leaf from the adrenaline dump,
Yeah.
And that's the kind of, when you take an animal's life at 20 feet away, it's so intimate. It's just a different thing.
Yeah.
You
It's crazy.
you watch it die, and so it's a pretty crazy experience. And I enjoy it. I love bringing home. We brought home 7 coolers of meat.
Wow.
Yeah, the second group. So the first group got, what do we get? Like 6 deer, I
8
think?
deer, I think, total.
Today.
Yeah.
And the second group we got 17.
Whew. Okay, we got some work to do next year.
Yeah, it was crazy, man. The other group that we come with, they're just old school cowboys, man, and they just, I got, oh, I don't even remember now.
You got 2 with us.
2 with you, and then 1 with them.
Okay.
So they got 16. So they're animals, man. But anyway,
you even killed one that didn't even have a wound on it, and we were like, how the hell is this deer dead?
Yeah, yeah. We ended up finding it where I hit it in the head.
Yeah.
It must have, that's the hard part that people don't even realize is not only like getting the shot and, getting the right pin, like you said, getting the right pin, getting the yardage, getting everything set up, and then you shoot, and these deer jump.
It's insane.
And so, Ben was there with Shed Crazy, right? He was there for a week with us, and he's, a very good bow hunter, very good shot. And he shot a couple times at the water hole that one night, and says they were perfect shots. It just jumped the string. And you actually I loved it, your picture of the deer. Wasn't that you who sent
that was me. That was me. I was frustrated.
I love that. I was like, dude, that is awesome. You took a picture of where your arrow was and then drew a deer where it was, and that's the truth. It's like,
and you can see my lighted knock right
you can
where
see your lighted knock, right where the vitals of the little stick figure deer you drew. And I sit in my blind just laughing, because that was such a good way to put it, because it is that way. We shoot and we're like, I want it to go right there, and then it goes there, but the deer spins or jumps or ducks in that. It's unbelievable. I mean, how fast is that arrow going?
It's crazy. One really cool thing about this hunt for me was just the reps, and then being able to say, what did I do wrong? And then getting the opportunity to try and fix that mistake like immediately.
Yep.
So like my first shot when I missed, I knew that I used the wrong pin. I was like, I'm not going to do that again if I get another opportunity, although I didn't think I was going to. And then you guys put me at the broken pipe, and that's the one that I sent you when I was at 60 yards. And I mean, it felt like the best arrow I've ever released. I was like, there it is. Those deer were hanging out at 80 yards. They came into 60, and I know I'm proficient at 60, and I let it rip. Perfect break. Arrow's going exactly where I wanted to. And it felt like that deer had enough time to walk up to me, smack me across the face, and then leave. And then my arrow just hit the dirt. And I was like, what the hell just happened? And so I was like, okay, one adjustment I made is I have that bow hitch on my bow, which is an amazing product, but I didn't have a screwdriver to tighten it down. So my bow was noisier than normal. So I could hear the rattle, and I'm like, maybe it's the rattle. So I popped the bow hitch off. I was like, I feel bad because I love that thing and I love not carrying my bow. But if it rattles and maybe it makes it a little bit quieter, maybe it'll get me there. And then also I was like, I'm not going to take another 60-yard shot. I was like, my bow's not fast enough. These things are too quick. I have to get within like sub 40. And that's what I moved to. And all of a sudden I started shooting deer. So it was fun to be able to make those adjustments.
It is, you know, and I think, like you said, you know, I go to Minnesota every year for a whitetail hunt, and I get, you know, 1 or 2 shots if I'm lucky. And you just don't get those chances to adjust. And, you know, you know, people, I hear people all the time say, well, I hunt, you know, I go shoot, you know, targets and stuff like that. And so I'm ready for different situations. You know, I've shot while I'm kneeling, I shoot while I'm sitting, you know, and it's like, no, that's not the same as hunting. Cause you know, you're sitting in this blind, and usually you're hunting with the wind. So you got 180 degrees of wind coming good in your way. You know, if they're behind you, they're not going to come in because your wind's blowing into them.
Yeah.
But you got 180 degree, you know, half radius, or is it a radius, of area to watch. And that thing can come in anywhere. You know, it's not like a target where you're like, it's right there, I'm going to sit down and shoot it, which is, again, good to practice. But, I mean, you saw the pictures that we sent, you know, we're shooting, you know, the blinds in front of us. You know, Ryan shot literally the blind, you know.
Yeah, he shot the log that was part of the blind. Yep.
Yeah. And then my dad came, because that's my dad's blind, right? Quote unquote. And I showed him the picture and says, look what Ryan did. You know, 3 days ago, he shot your blind. And then we sat down, or he goes into the blind, and the opening morning, and I go pick him up. I says, how did it go? And he says, you're not going to believe it. And I says, what's up? And he says, I shot the blind. You know,
you put it in his head.
A buck came in at 10 feet.
No way.
10 feet away. He says it was 10 feet away. And he says, I knew, you know, trying to thread it through the hole, I knew that was going to be an issue. You'd showed me the picture of Ryan. He's sitting that a lot of times too. And he says, I looked at it, and he says, like, you know, where its vitals were, he says, I just couldn't get high enough, you know, to get the shot.
Yeah.
And he just nicked. And that's the other thing too, is you don't have to peg the wood, you know, he just nicked it. Just his broadhead clipped it, and it just went up and hit it in the horn. And he says it ran off like shaking its head. Says it ran off, just says it hit it right in the top of the horn, and it literally ran off just shaking its head like, what in the hell just happened? You know, like knocked it, you know, dizzy or something. And
yeah,
he says, I just sat there, you know, and my arrow, you know, gone, and this deer's walking off shaking its head. And he thought, yeah, that's about right. So
that's too funny, man. I've had multiple people on my podcast, which for the people from listening from Rick's side of the house here is about telling hunting stories, but they're rifle hunters, and they shot at deer, and the deer drops, and they're like, sweet, got him. They walk over, they can't find a bullet wound. They grab the deer, they drag it in. They realize later when that deer wakes up, they shot it in the antler and knocked the deer unconscious, which is absolutely crazy. But I had one guy tell a story where he was he like put it in the back of his like station wagon before the deer woke up, and then just destroyed his car. So they're like opening all the doors, trying to get the deer out of the car. Just crazy stuff. So I heard one. I've never heard anyone do it with an arrow though.
Yeah. My uncles have told me they found elk and deer with broadheads embedded in their, you know, in their horn. Yeah. And they kill it later with a gun. So, you know, bow hunters will shoot at it. It'll hit the velvet, stick into the actual antler. A couple months later, the gun hunt happens, and they'll find that broadhead embedded in their horn. But yeah, my grandpa told me of a guy back in the day, and you never know if it's all true, but he swears it is. But a guy shot a deer, same thing, big old buck. And back then, you know, they used to put the gun in the antlers and sit down.
I think you told me this story, but yeah, keep going.
So yeah, they shoot it, hit it in the horn, you know, didn't really check it, sit down, put the gun in the horn, sitting there holding it for a photo, and it jumped up and ran away with his gun.
Or so he said.
That's
awesome.
You never know, man. Yeah. When you like you said, the one I shot, you know, I went up to it and I'm like, you know, I don't know where I hit it, you know, and it's dark.
Let's add a little bit to that story, right? Because there's something pretty important before. What walked by you earlier that evening?
Yeah, poachers.
So you weren't sure if it was your deer, because you did let an arrow fly, or if the poachers came through. Who knows if they even had shoes on, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, with such a random, Yeah. So yeah. It's yeah. I was sitting there hunkered down, and they walked 20, which was kind of scary. Three dudes with guns with bandanas over their face. That should not be doing what they're doing.
Right?
And so I'm hunkered down, and they go walking by, and I'm like, oh man, this ruined my sit. They're gonna go hunting around me with guns, and so I was just sitting there playing on my phone, and I looked over in this few does, and a couple fawns come in, and I'm like, okay, and I took this shot, and it was like 20 yards, but again, they're just so crazy that
Yeah.
it was drinking when I shot. It was 20 yards away, and when I shot, it was drinking, and it just when I let the arrow go, they just you know trash. And I didn't think I hit it. I just was positive. I thought it went to the side of it, and well, I was actually walking over, which this is a good lesson for me and everybody listening to always check and find your arrow, and make sure you look even when you're positive you missed, because I was positive I missed. And I walked over to see where I was going to sit the next morning because it was the night hunt. And I was walking over to see where I should, hunker down for it in the morning, and walked over there. And I don't even know how I saw it. I didn't have a flashlight on. It was just faded light, really faded.
Yeah.
And I could see the glow of something. And I'm like, that looks like the white of its legs, these axis deer. There's one behind me on my wall that I shot there in Hawaii. But down their legs it gets white. And I thought, and so I grabbed a flashlight and flicked it on because it was about 15, 20 feet down a hill, and there's a deer. And so I go walking down there, and I'm like,
Not easy.
holy shit, did I get this? Like, no way. And I walk down there, and there's no hole in it. There's a little bit of blood on its cheek and no hole. And I'm like, pushing on it and squishing it. And I'm like, it's fresh, like it just died. And couldn't figure it out. And so I'm like, well, maybe the poachers shot it. I thought that, maybe they shot it,
Yeah.
because out there they shoot them in the head, right? They don't want to ruin the meat. And so I was like, well, I'm taking it. I don't care who shot it. So I hurried and loaded it up. Right before that, so I was sitting there, and like 20 minutes before that, two of the poachers, two out of the three, came walking back down. The third one never came. And so I knew that a couple of them had left. And so you're right. I thought maybe they dropped it in that hole and ran to get, the truck or something, whatever. And I thought, well, I'm going to, one way or another, I'm going to take this thing. So I grabbed it and, picked it up and hauled it down to the truck. And then we inspected it at camp, and it ended up that I did shoot it, and I shot it through the cheek, and it came out the back and, died within 20 feet.
Yeah.
Just went over a little drop and fell down the hill.
That's crazy.
And then we found my arrow. That's the thing that confirmed it. Was Ben found my arrow the next day and says it was for sure you. And but yeah, just a crazy, like you said, your what is it? Official Hunting Stories? Is that the name of your podcast?
It's just Hunting Stories podcast. Nothing
Okay.
special.
Yeah. So that's, I mean, man, I love it because everybody asks, why do you love hunting so much? And I really love the meat. We've been eating axis deer for the last week. We just had it for dinner last night.
Nice.
It's just so good. So I love that part of it. And then I love the stories. That's why I do it. I go out there. I always tell people, if I was in Hawaii for 2 weeks alone by myself, I wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
I go there to be with like-minded men and women, people. And you look at it, we were there 7 days, and all of the little, me drinking milk, right? That's the funny one,
Yes,
barefoot poachers, the pipe, right? We know the pipe story.
Or when I called in a buck and I was begging someone to let me have another buck tag.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's like that's what it's about, all the little stories, and that's what makes it so much fun. And so I love that that's what you based your podcast on, and obviously I didn't realize you've only been doing this 8 years. Is that what you said?
Yeah, only maybe 9 at this point. I think this will be my 9th season.
I mean, look how much it's grabbed you. Look at how it's like you said, it's become your life, and me too. I got out of it for 10 years. And now most of my adventures, I do a lot of travel with my family, just, sightseeing and traveling. But beyond that, it's mostly hunting trips. I'm going to Alaska in a week with 9 other men. you know, for an adventure. I go to
Yeah.
Africa, in 3 weeks or
Hope
5 weeks.
hopefully we're going odd hunting here in the next couple months too,
I would
right?
love that. Yeah, I would love
Yeah.
that. That for me. That's what is, that it's just kind of become my, and it's again not the kill. It's that's very little of it. It's having a reason to go with 9 guys to Alaska and have all the fun and laughs and everything, all the in between. That's
Yep.
the fun for me.
Disconnecting. It feels very much like human nature, right? Just sit around with people doing something really hard, feeding your family, and just sharing stories. Like that's like how all life started, right? Was just doing those things.
Absolutely. You get exercise. I
Hmm.
walked in the 2 weeks I was in Hawaii. I walked, well, my watch said it's probably a little bit off, but it said I walked 78 miles.
That's pretty good in 2 weeks.
I went to that trough that you said at a lot. The
Yep.
next week, nobody really wanted to go over there, and so I walked to that morning and night. Like,
It's a bit of a walk,
yeah, I think it was like 3.5 miles or something round trip.
something like that. Yeah.
Easy walk, not hard, but I mean, it's a lot harder when you have your deer on your back like you did.
No, that was
That's
well, Kip, right? He threw his
well,
whole
you had your
doe.
meat in your pack though. That was
Yeah, there's a big difference between a deer on your shoulders for a 2 mile hike and a deer in a backpack strapped tight to your back. So it was tough. Mine was a lot weighed more than his because it was a buck versus his little doe. But man, when I saw Kip with that lactate, it was like his left side was covered in blood and his right side was covered in milk. And I was like, good on you, man. Your first
yeah,
ever kill. Congratulations. Glad it's not
yeah,
me. Because that deer
yeah.
was just smacking him, and he was covered. He was looking pretty beat up when he got back.
Yeah, that's a far walk with that much weight on your shoulders, and but yeah, it's, you get exercise, you make friendships, you make memories,
Yep.
you get to meet the culture, the people, and be a part of their culture and their ways and try their food, and I had the second week we had some cowboys out there, just some good old boys, and they'd never tried pokey ever. They didn't even know what it was.
Yeah.
And so I took there was
This
4.
year was their first time because
Yeah.
they'd been out there before, right? And they didn't
Yeah,
have any other.
they wouldn't even
Wow.
try it. No, wouldn't even try it. And finally, I says, "Listen," I sit down and I'm like, "Listen, life's about experiences and trying stuff, and you don't have to love it and like it, but I'm like, try it, just try it."
Yeah.
And it was funny because I got the poke nachos with the, what's the spicy mayo,
Yep.
and 2 of them ended up buying one and sharing it, and they ate the whole plate, and the other two younger guys, tried mine and had 3 or 4 bites, and they're like, "It's good. It is good."
Yeah.
And I know it's hard to get over that mental aspect of, raw fish. I was the same way when I first tried it, but, that's what's cool is you take these young guys that are from Utah in a small town of, like, a couple hundred people is where they're from.
Yeah.
I mean, a
Okay.
tiny town, and maybe 1,000 people, and they tried something, that they've never experienced, and that to me is what the trip is about, you know?
Mhm.
And so I love it, man. I love it. I love it. It's
Yeah.
that's the fun of it. So yeah,
I agree 100% about
I'm
their
glad you
working
came.
hard and having great stories. And thanks for having me, man. It was my 40th birthday party, and for literally a year, I'd been calling people trying to figure out how to make it happen. Um, and they were like, "Well, it's not a great time to hunt because my birthday's actually in April." But when I got invited to this, I was like, "I can party a little bit later. I don't need to go on my birthday." And so it was exactly what I've wanted to do for years, and it just sort of fell into my lap. So thanks for having me. But
It's funny how that is, the guy who canceled on my trip, his name's Sam, and I always hunt with him in Minnesota every fall, and he just couldn't make that one trip and had to bail out, 4 years ago, and I jumped in on it. And same thing, that's what I always tell people. Like, if you can do it, if you can, if there's a way to, figure it out, say yes.
yeah,
You'll never regret it. You'll never remember the couple grand that it cost, but you'll remember the trip forever,
yeah,
and that's what I just tell people. It's like, man, just figure it out. I have a lot of people saying next year, 2 years, 3 years, and you hope, but what they say, tell God, if you want to make God laugh, tell him your plan. Hey guys, I wanted to just step away from this conversation real quick and talk about a few things that we have going on here at M42 Adventures. One of the things that I'm most excited about is we actually landed our first couple sponsors. Big deal for a new startup like this, a huge deal. And it's even a bigger deal for the sponsors that we got. Origin USA, Pete Roberts, just a heck of a guy. I met him up in Maine at his headquarters 3 or 4 years ago, and just a solid human. And I'm so excited that they're on board and going to be, they're actually our first sponsor. And then right behind them, Montana Knife Company came in. Josh Smith, the founder of that, and just good people, good companies, American made, bringing jobs back to America, and just true patriots. And so I could not be more excited to one, have our first sponsors, and two, have them be such large, meaningful, good companies. And I'm just so excited. So I wanted to jump out with that. Second, I wanted to talk about some of the events we've had. We just got back from Hawaii with a group of individuals, two groups of individuals hunting out there for a couple weeks with our bows for axis deer. Absolutely amazing time. I do it every year, and I was excited to finally launch it as an M42 event, and a complete success. So that was amazing. Had built some new relationships, and just an absolute wonderful time. Also, we're heading to Alaska next week. So I head to Alaska next week with 8 other individuals that we're going to take up there and let them experience Alaska for the first time. So if you've ever wanted to get out and do that, stay tuned. We're going to have more Alaska adventures planned and experiences. And then just to update everybody, the New Harmony events, the events here, the retreats that we're hosting ourselves at this 50-acre ranch here in Utah are both sold out for this fall. Excited for that. Can't wait. And I want to appreciate everybody who supported us and is going to join us for that. So, and then again, Africa, we've got Africa coming up in 4 weeks. I just bought my flights, taking my wife and 3 kids. We've got about 20 spots sold. There is still a few spots. April 5th to the 11th with Ryan Mickler. He's the headliner. And then April 11th to the 17th I'm going to be the headliner for that. So we're going to have a great time. Helicopter rides, hunting, photo safari, humanitarian projects, going to orphanages, and Origin is actually, that's one of their main sponsorships is that hunt. So want to thank them again for jumping on board and supporting us. Number 4 is our store. I wanted to go over that. We got hats, apparel, all different things. If you want to get some gear, love the support. We're starting to get orders, and we appreciate all that. And you can go on there and order on our website. Again, subscribe, follow, listen, and continue to support us. We truly appreciate it. We got some amazing guests lined up, as you can hear right now in this episode, and we're going to continue to line up amazing guests. So continue to follow along, and we appreciate it, and we will return to this conversation. Thank you. One of my favorite quotes, and it's like, you're not necessarily in control of this thing. So take the opportunity when you have it. And man, I'm glad you came. So
yeah. And by the amount of people that want to come on this trip, you're gonna have to be out there for 3 weeks sometime soon here.
Dude,
Rick.
My list is getting. I actually talked to Ryan yesterday, and I'm like, what are we thinking? And yeah, what's happening is we brought the core group of guys, and they couldn't make it, this year. Now they want to come next year, and then we bring new guys, and now it's turned into, last year when I announced, the trip, I sold the 16 spots in like 20 minutes.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've got to figure that out. We're going to do some stuff with M42 Adventures, out there. So I'm trying to kind of figure out that now and working, with, the guys on Molokai to kind of put that together. So I'm hopefully here in the next month or so, I'll have some information, but yeah, it's cool. It's, it's one of those things where also I don't want to ruin it for me. I love it. I enjoy it. I go out there with 100%. My dad. It's kind of one of those things. So I'm being very cautious on it. So yeah, we'll see.
I respect that. And I think I've told you this multiple times, but I'll say it because we're on the podcast now. But hunting camp is a sacred thing for me. I don't invite just anybody. And that's why when I get invited to a hunting camp, I'm like, let me do everything I possibly can to assist and make sure that I am, if nothing else, taking nothing away from anyone. They're going to have an experience that hopefully is elevated. But if nothing else, I'm not taking away from it. Because I've been at hunting camps. But again, back in my early hunting days, my brother-in-law, they said I couldn't come to hunting camp until I was married because I had to be part of the family. Okay, fine. I get that. 3 years into it, he has a buddy. He's like, yeah, come on down. And so this guy comes, and he's a raging alcoholic. We have a fair amount of beers in camp, and he doesn't do anything except drink in camp and then stomp around the woods. And when he leaves, he takes all of our beer.
Mm,
And I know
nice.
you're not a big drinker. I'm not a huge drinker either.
Yeah.
Anyways, but I was just like, hey, we're here for a week. What are you doing? Like, this is just so inconsiderate. You've done nothing to add to the experience. And so, to the listeners, if you ever do get invited, just make sure that you are not taking away from the experience, because it's important to everybody, I think.
That's a good point. And people don't realize how little it can be. I have a buddy of mine who I've grown up with, and as we've gotten older, I've done better financially, and he'll come hang out at my house, or my cabin is the one instance that I know where he'll come out to my cabin, and my cabin's 45 minutes from town. It's here near Zion National Park. And, and I know he's a big drinker, and I know
Mhm.
that about him. And so he's done this to me a couple times, but the last time I says, "Hey man, if you're coming out, why don't you stop and get some beer? I don't have many out here." He says, "Oh, I'm good, man. I'm not going to drink. Your cabin's out there a ways. Even if you've seen my cabin, it's a pretty steep driveway for about a half a mile up to it."
Yeah.
And he's like, "I don't need to drink anyway." He comes out, sits there for a minute. He's like, "Dude, this is beautiful, man. I love it out here. I just need a beer."
Yeah.
Dude, he
Okay.
starts running through my beers, and he drinks like 12 beers. I had like, I think a 12 pack, he drinks all my beers. He's like, "All right, man, we're going to head out," leaves. And I wasn't even really paying attention. I'm just kind of running around with the kids and hanging out and everybody. I go
Yeah.
to get in the fridge later, and I'm like, "Where
Just
the hell's my beer?"
framing deck picks, right?
Yeah. Good old deck picks. Yeah. Yep. And he had drank all my beer, and then it's, a 45-minute drive into town. And I'm like, man, I'm just not going to invite him back. And I
Yeah.
really haven't. Because, it seems like such a little thing, but that's what you need to be aware of. I think like you're right. When when you have these, we've had a couple guys come to Hawaii that, when somebody gets a deer, they go to bed, and it's like,
Yeah.
no, man, we stay up and we help that person break down the deer, vacuum seal it. If you don't
Yep.
want to do that, help cook. There's always something to do while everybody's doing something.
Yeah. That was the
And
first night when you shot that deer. That's exactly. I was panicking. I was like, what do I do? What do I do? Because you shot the deer.
yeah,
Check. Rick's
Yeah.
covered.
mhm,
Ryan, he dressed it. He took the hide off and he put it up into quarters. And then Seth and Kip just take over, and they're just ripping that thing apart, and they're breaking it down. And I'm like, well, what can I do? How can I be helpful here? And I was like, give me some salt and pepper. Let's fire this grill up. I'm going to make some steaks for everybody. And so you're right. You just got to participate. You
mhm.
can't just sit back, and it's not a vacation.
Absolutely.
Well, it is, but it's not in the normal sense of a vacation. I think I
Yeah, so it's
was listening to Ryan's podcast, and he was saying that like vacation for him is not going and sitting on a beach and drinking margaritas. Vacation is doing something different and working hard and having those experiences.
Absolutely. Yep, and I think that's the people who get invited back. So that's a good point to tell people who are going out on their first trip is just be useful, and it doesn't have to be, if you don't know how to break down a deer, don't. But just stand there and watch and learn, and
Ask
hand them what they
questions.
need, and hand them a knife if they need it, help them lift the deer up if they need it. Like there's things you can do, but mostly it's just having you not be over in bed sleeping where we all want to be because we're exhausted.
Yep.
That's where it gets annoying, and you're like, who's this guy? He's not a team player.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it's like when Kip dropped his deer, and I was like, just you drop a deer, call me. I'm gonna run down this road until I can get there to help you carry this deer back.
Yeah, you were very
he
good
didn't
about
want
that.
He didn't want any help carrying the deer, but I was like, let me carry your bow, let me carry your pack, let me just take some weight off you, and let's get this thing home. And he's like,
And
yeah,
just being
that's
there,
perfect.
just having, somebody there saying, "You good? You need help? I'm here." You don't even necessarily have to do anything, but it's just nice to have somebody. Ryan shot a deer a couple last year, I think, hit a good buck, and says, "I can't find it. I'm going to give up. I've been looking." And I says, "Let me hike up there. Let's just look together." And I hiked up the hill, and we walked around in the dark for another hour with flashlights and looked around. Didn't find it. And we start walking back to camp, or to the truck, and I says, "Sorry, man. I wish we would have found that." And he says, "Dude, I just appreciate you coming and helping me look."
Yeah.
A lot of guys would have just said, "Oh, you've looked already? You didn't find it? Okay, I'm down here in the truck. Come, I'll wait for you."
Yeah.
Seth, one thing that I remember about Seth and why Seth Studley, he's got a podcast, Anatomy of Us. Good dude. I just recorded with him last week. And one thing that reminds me of him that I remember about him is last year when he came out, I hit a buck, over on, he sent me his pin and I sent him my pin. He was the closest person to me, but he was like a mile away.
Yeah.
And I'm like, dude, don't come over here, man. I'm like, and I thought I hit it good. I thought I was going to recover it. I ended up not recovering it. It went onto private property, and I went as far as they would let me go onto the private property to look for it. But he walked clear over there up the wall. It was up on top of the wall.
Oh,
So he
jeez.
hiked the wall,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
and
So
over
reason
the
it's called the
top.
wall.
Yeah, it's the reason it's called a wall. It's just straight up and down. And I'll never forget that. Like when I look at
Yeah.
Seth, I'm like, no matter what, our differences are or whatever, I know that he is a good person with a good heart that wants to be helpful. And that to me is the
100%.
kind of person that I want there. And in all, every aspect of my life, we have those friends that take, like, I don't need you in my life. I want
Yeah.
the ones who I'll fill your cup and you fill mine. And
Yep.
that's, once you get older, you start realizing that's where you want to put your energy. So that's exactly right. That's who we bring to camp.
Yeah, 100%. And it's in life and hunting. Like a lot of before I started hunting, I have a lot of friends from that area of my life, but all they want to do is go to the bars and do those kind of things. And I'm like, I'd rather go camping with my family. I'd rather do these things. So it's just about finding the right people to be around. And I think through hunting, I found a lot of really good people. And I think it's the work ethic that comes with hunters. They're just willing to do things that suck. We kind of love it. So
yeah, I think if you have that mindset of, you want to go out there and do hard things and be self-sufficient, I mean, it's hard. Like you saw, you went out there, shot a big old buck, a 1.5 miles from camp, and you broke it down by yourself. First time you ever broke it down, loaded it into your pack. And the reason I think yours was very difficult as well is because you shot it in the morning, so you had to hike it back in the middle of the hot sun.
yeah. Ryan saved my life with that half bottle of water he showed up with. So I texted you guys. Yeah, well, I texted you guys when I was like, hey, if you guys beat me back to the house, could someone just run down the road with a bottle of water?
Yeah.
Like, that's all I need, because I drank one, and then I use another one to just kind of like clean some of the meat and clean my hands a little bit before I took off. So I just was out when I started my hike home. And so him meeting me about halfway with that water, I didn't need him to carry my bow or the deer or anything. I just needed to quench the thirst. So he saved my life right there. So
yeah, and again, that's the you asked, you said I need this, and we figured out how to get it to you, and vice versa. I know you did the same. After you'd killed your deer, you worked hard to try to get Seth a deer, and some things like that. So yeah, that's what we want, man. That's what we're looking for. And we're very specific on, this Alaska, experience that we have. I sold it out in 45 minutes. We have a, fishing boat up there. We're taking some friends up there and going to go fishing and fish the rivers.
That's awesome.
and do some float planes and stuff like that. And it was just something that, that's what we're looking for, is just people who are going to come and be a part of the team and work with us, not against us. So yeah, that's what it's about, man.
Yeah, absolutely. That and some great stories, in my opinion. So I'm going to pivot us a little bit, Rick. I want you to tell the story of your leg injury in Molokai. I want you to tell that story, because that story cracks me up. So, and it's not, I know we're both releasing this podcast, so I want to make sure we get some good stories in for my listeners, and I'm sure your listeners will appreciate it too, because it's a good one.
Yeah. So that was, I'm trying to think. Okay, so I think that was my first year. I'm trying to think. Yeah, it was. So yeah, first year I went out. So I think I've been there 4 years. So 4 years ago, Ryan calls up, says, come out again. I'm not, I've been out of shape. I wasn't training. I wasn't, not that Molokai is the hardest thing, but I'm 40 years old, and just, he called me off the couch, called me out of retirement. Right. I had my bow that I actually shot. I was going to take it this year, but my bow is a 2007 Bowtech. And so I went and got it out of my case, and took it down to the guy, had him put a new string on it, bought some arrows, and headed off to Hawaii. And we'd been out there. The one good thing that you guys have is when we first went out, there was no information. We stayed in a Connex. I told you that, literally a shipping container. No power. There was no power. We all brought like battery chargers for our phones and stuff.
Yeah, I remember you saying one day you just spent the entire day sitting in the truck for the air conditioning because it was so hot.
Literally, yeah. We'd go out, 5 of us.
I believe
6 of
that.
us. would sit in the car with the AC running for hours during the middle of the day, just because it was so hot, and we'd shower outside with a garden hose. I mean, it was very, very rustic, which, I loved.
Yeah.
I stayed in it 17 days the second year, and that was tough. Whew.
Yeah.
Felt like a prison sentence there, but anyway, so yeah, so we go out. We'd been there hunting for a few days, and from Utah, you kind of spot and stock.
Mhm.
So we're kind of scattered out. We'd see these deer come by, and we'd go after them, and for a few days, and just couldn't get on them, couldn't get any good shots. So we were all pretty frustrated, and just trying to figure these animals out. And it's a do-it-yourself hunt. They drop you off, and they're like, hey, good luck, go have a good time. Here's the boundary of the property. Give her hell.
Yeah.
And that's how it was the first year. And so we had no knowledge of, that they don't stop running, all these different things, So by about I think this was like the 5th day, nobody had killed anything. And we found this area where they're, coming through a lot by the pipes and all that kind of stuff, all down there in the
Yeah.
trees. And we decided we were going to line up. So I think that year there was like 8 of us. So we're like, okay, we're going to line up, and you know how the deer come, they kind of come in waves. They'll come in different groups, for a couple
Yeah.
hours in the morning.
And maybe
And-
one 5 minutes after another. Like if you
Yeah,
bust a bunch
never-
of deer, a new group might come in immediately. It's the craziest thing.
Exactly, yeah. Or you might have to wait 45 minutes and then 100 to come, or, it's just it's like a migration. You're almost trying to catch them, and they're going from, where they bed down to feed, and then they go from feed back to bedding down. And this property is where they come
Yeah.
through, basically. It's a couple thousand acres, but they just move through it. And so we decide, we're like, we have a plan. We actually set at the Connex, and I have it on a video where we're all sitting there and we have rocks on a table, and we got like Brandon Lilly there. He's a power lifter, pretty famous dude for powerlifting. I didn't know who he was. Like I said, I walked into the camp, didn't know who any of these guys were, but so he's over there. He's tattooed, from the jawline down. I mean, and I'm like, dude, that guy's pretty scary looking, and so he goes over there. He's got these rocks, and he's like, this is what we're going to do. This is what I think would work. Let's line up like every 30 yards all the way down the road, and somebody's going to get a shot. And then he says, and then I think it was like because there was better spots. And so if you got down, if you were down here, you didn't necessarily want to be down there. So he's like, every 20 minutes or something, we'll move and adjust. And so we're like, okay. So we all go line up. We're scattered down this, and you know how it is. They just come through, and they come through, and a couple people get some shots, miss, whatever. And it's like, okay, let's move spots. And one of the guys, I don't want to name any names, but he knows who he is, but he didn't want to move. And
Yeah.
so Ryan goes down to his spot, and he says, hey, man, move out of the way. You got to go down to the next spot. And he says, no, I just got here. And Ryan says, dude, the deal was Brandon told the deal, like every 20 minutes we shuffle down and we rotate.
Yeah.
And he's like, I don't want to move. This is a good spot. And Ryan's like, that's why we're moving. So he forced him to move down. And I'm next to I'm right here 30 yards from Ryan, and then he's on the other side. And this group of deer come through like right then. Like they get settled down, we're sitting there, and this little group of deer come running through. And Ryan takes a shot into the group and ends up hitting a fawn. So
Yeah.
It's
4
the
years
truth.
later, you guys are still making fun of him. for that,
we
but yeah.
tease him. Yeah, he's the fawn killer, right? What do we call it? Onlyfawns.com.
There we go. I'm sure he loves that.
Oh my God. Oh man. So I'm looking over there, and he's, they're about 40 yards away running, and he takes a shot and just gets behind and hits a fawn, a yearling. It wasn't like brand new, but it was a young deer.
Yeah.
And it's the first deer we've killed. So I jump up, I run over there, and Ryan's like, I think I got one. And we go running up, and Ryan, and I look at it, and I'm like, oh shoot, that's a fawn, like, and my other buddy comes up, and Ryan's like, dude, I got one. finally, we've been here 5 days, 8 guys sleeping in a Connex, sweating, dying. And he's ecstatic. And I'm like,
Yeah.
bro, you should be embarrassed, like you shouldn't be excited. And so, and all of a sudden my other buddy is like, gets pissed off. And I'm like,
Because
"Bro,
Ryan made
what's-"
him leave his spot.
and he shot the fawn. He's like, dude, that should have been my fawn. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm like, bro, you should be embarrassed. Like, you don't want that. And he's like, that should be my fawn. He made me move and it wasn't time to move. And I'm like, what is happening? But that's how hard that hunt is and how, I mean, it's our first year. We're so frustrated. We're so excited to finally get some meat, even though it was a small portion.
Mm.
And so the other kid like gets like angry. Like I start talking like, and I just met him and
Yeah.
I'm like, hey bro, just relax, man. It's all good. It's just a deer, like don't. And he's like, walk away, bro, walk away. Like, and I'm like, you gonna fight me? Like
Yeah.
we're gonna
Yeah,
fight
just
over
trying
a
to tell you it's
fawn?
okay.
Yeah. I'm like, dude, I'm trying to be cool, and I'm like, dude, shut up. I'm like, okay, I'll walk away. So I go over to Ryan and Ryan's like, oh, he's over there like, gutting his fawn. Just so proud. And I'm like, bro, I'm gonna go over here somewhere else and hunt. I'm gonna go find a different spot. I'm like, he's being a punk, and Ryan's like, really? Well, like that's lame. And he's like, all right, cool. And I told the guy, I'm like, dude, just shake it off and keep hunting. It's not over. Like, keep hunting. And
Yeah.
he's like, I'm just leave me alone, bro. I'm not in the mood. Like this sucks.
Yeah.
And
There's
I'm
only
like, all right, so-
39,000 more deer out here,
Yeah,
so let's
yeah.
get back to it.
Exactly. So I leave and I go walking, like on like down into the wash, kind of where you were hunting a lot, down behind there by the red light.
Okay.
And I get down in there and I'm sneaking along and I see this buck coming all alone, just kind of trotting along, and I'm like, oh my gosh. And it's coming like down this way and I'm trying to cut it off.
Okay.
And so I'm sneaking as fast as you can sneak, and it's just kind of, it's alone.
Especially as like a 6'5", 6'6" guy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Only
yeah.
sneak so slow.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
fast.
It's pretty awkward. So I'm trying to get over to where I think this thing's going to go, because I see it a long ways off. It's, 500 yards away, kind of coming down over the hill. And I'm like, it's alone, which helps a ton. There's not a ton of eyes and ears. I can at least watch it and see what it's looking at. And if it's looking my way, I stop. So anyway, I get over there. It's about a 55-yard shot. I'm like, hey, this is the best I'm going to get. It's still kind of walking. And I take a shot. And yeah, I hit it a little bit back. Not bad, but a little bit back. But, I'm like, okay, it's going to die. It's a good shot. And again, this is after I hadn't been hunting for 12 years, just picked up a bow. And it starts kind of, you hit them and they kind of, it's going to die, and it's walking like it's going to die.
Yeah.
And but it turns and starts walking kind of on an angle away from me. And I'm like, I'm going to catch up to it and shoot it again. So this is where everything kind of went wrong.
This is my favorite part.
So it's kind of walking, as fast as it can, but it's hurt, and it starts going. And I'm like, I'm going to run up on that thing. I think I can catch it before it gets over into the thick stuff and put another arrow in it. And so by now it's probably 150 yards away, moving, relatively quick. And I take off running. And I'm 41 years old. I don't think I had sprinted for a few years. I don't even know the last time I had sprinted. And I've got my pack on, I've got like a 25-pound pack on, my bow. And I remember running, and I'm like, oh, I'm catching up to this thing. This is going to work. And I literally remember running thinking, damn, I'm still fast. Like you said, at that time I was 260 pounds and 6'5". And I remember running thinking, dude, I still got it. Like I am, dude, like I still got it. And I'd ran probably 100 yards. I think I got within like 70 yards of it or something like that. And I heard a pop. And I always use the analogy, have you seen those Chuck Norris videos on YouTube where like he'll pull the trigger and then you see like a lady fall down the stairs, or he'll pull the trigger and you see like,
yeah.
dude, I I don't know what it looked like, but I know what it felt like. And my back of my leg, and I never really had an injury. I didn't play a lot of sports in high school or anything. I was more into like outdoor stuff. But there was a pop in my leg, and it was like somebody shot me with a 30-06. And I remember just falling, and literally like my bow flies, I'm just sliding through the dirt, and finally I come to a stop, and I'm like, my femur's broke. I didn't even know what the hell a hamstring was at the time, apparently
Yeah.
that's pretty common injury, I guess, but it pops, and I thought I snapped my femur. And so I'm laying there in the dirt, and I remember laying there and I have like dirt in my mouth, my bow scattered.
That
And I
dirt gets
remember,
everywhere too, and it's just so dark red.
dude,
Ugh.
it's the worst. All my stuff's still stained. And I remember I look up, and about, probably 80 yards away, something like that, the deer goes over and lays down. And I'm on the ground, and I could just see its horns, and I'm like, oh, it's laid down right there. I'm like, it's hurt. I gotta kill this thing. I've got a broken leg. It's a career ender. I was like, it's a career ending injury. I guarantee.
Of course. Yeah.
And so I'm gathering. I crawl over and I get my bow, and I'm like on the verge of tears. I'm scared. I really am scared. I'm like, this is. I don't know. I thought I broke my leg from running, and I'm like, this is not good. So I'm trying to gather myself, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is not good. I'm out here in the middle of nowhere. Nobody knows where I'm at. I gotta start figuring this out. And I look over to my right, and I see Ryan Mickler sneaking along. I'm like, what the hell? And he's kind of crouched down, you get in that little crouch, and he's looking straight ahead, and he's got an arrow knocked, and he's just sneaking along. And he's about probably 20 yards from me. He didn't see me.
Yeah.
And he's sneaking along, and I'm like, Ryan. And he's like, I'm all,
just looking around.
Gosh, yeah, no idea. He's just like, and I'm all, Ryan. And he's like, what are you doing? And I'm like, bro, I'm hurt. Oh, bro, I broke my femur. And he's like, what? Are you kidding me? How? I'm like, running? He's like, and he's like, where are you running? And I'm like, I was trying to catch up to a deer. And he's like, there's one right up here. Fuck. And again, he's coming off the high of killing this fawn, So
yeah, he still has the fawn on his back, right? He's still
the fawn's in a Ziploc. Fawn's in a Ziploc in his pack, he kind of quartered it, So he's got this buck in his sight, and I'm like, and I says, this is where the communication went wrong. I says, I know, I just shot it. And he didn't hear that part.
Yeah.
So he says, there's a buck up here. I says, I know, I just shot it. I says, I need help. And he says, wait here. I'm going to go shoot this deer. And I'm like, okay. And I at least thought he's going to go up there and put it out of its misery, right? Like finish it off. So I'm sitting there kind of for a minute, and I kid you not, I won't swear, but I kid you not, for him to go 10 feet took like 10 minutes. Like I'm sitting there, like I thought I'm bleeding out. I'm like, okay, I'm in horrible trouble. And I'm laying there in the dirt with dirt in my mouth. And I'm watching this guy sneak up on a deer that is dying.
Yeah.
And I remember just sitting there like, hell is going on? Like, go kill it. And he's like, one step, and he's looking around, and he's thinking he's sneaking up on a buck that is healthy. Yeah. And so he's thinking that he's just like, the man. And I remember laying there in the dirt, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to be dead by the time Ryan Mickler gets up and kills this deer. So I start crawling over to Ryan, and I'm like my legs, you'd have thought that I was a paraplegic. Literally, I'm dragging my lower half behind me, just dead weight. And I'm moving my bow, and then I'd crawl, and then I move my bow.
Your bow.
Yeah, you never know. And I catch up to him. I'm crawling, and I catch up to Ryan. And I get about 5 yards from him, and I'm like, kill it. And he's like, shut up, Rick. But then I'm like, kill the deer, Ryan. I'm injured. I'm dying, bro. And he's like, shh. I remember him shushing me. Like, I just vividly remember him looking down at me, and I'm like pulling on his pant, you know, and I'm like, kill it. And I thought he knew that it was hurt.
Yeah.
I never repeated that because I thought I had said it and I thought he heard it. And so he thinks he's still, again, closing the distance on this deer. So he's like kicking me off his leg. Literally, he's like, dude, leave me alone. Right? There's a buck right here. He's like, I'll help you in a minute. And I'm like, bro, I'm like, help me. And he's like, freak. And he keeps shushing me. And I remember that. I just remember him shushing me. And I'm like, you're shushing me? Like, I'm dying, bro. And he's sneaking along, sneaking along. We get up there, and I remember him getting like 40 yards. It's laying there. You can see it, but it's kind of in some thick weeds. You know, those weeds that kind of grow up.
Yeah.
You can see its horns. And I'm like, leaned up like a sea lion, you know, like trying to see where it's at. And he's like 40 yards away, and I'm like, shoot it. Shoot it. And he's like, I think I can get closer. And I'm like, good Lord, dude, this is taking forever. We're like 30 minutes into this, you know, and I'm like, I've gone out of, you know, I was in shock. I'm starting to feel the pain now. And I'm like, bro, just kill the damn thing, you know, like it's probably dead already. And he keeps sneaking. We finally get up about 20 yards. He's been shushing me the whole way. He's really frustrated with me at this point, telling me to go away. and I'm like, I'm not going to leave, you know, like just kill it. And I remember he pulls back his bow and it's like 20 yards and he shoots and misses. It goes goes over the top of it. And I'm like, bro. And in his defense, it was down in these thick weeds. You couldn't really see where its body was.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's like you're kind of guessing if I remember trying to see if its body was going to the left or to the right. You could just see its face and its horns. And he shot, and the body wasn't there. He shot it on the wrong side, and he says, oh, it's not right there. He's like, I missed. And I'm like, oh my gosh, just kill it. I'm going to crawl over there with my knife and cut its throat, you know, at this point. And he finally leans over and shoots it. Yeah. Shoots it, and it hits it, and it jumps up, and there's an arrow in it from me. And he's like, it's already hit. And I'm like, are you kidding me? That's what I told you. And he's like, what? I'm like, dude, I told you I shot it. It's dying. And he's like, oh, I didn't know that. He's like, bro, I just thought I snuck up on this axis deer from 100 yards out. And I was like, I'm like, Rambo. I'm like, no,
I killed
bro,
the fawn. I Rambo this deer. I'm the best hunter in the world.
I'm like, yeah, I'm like, dude, the deer is literally looking at you like, hurry up, please. I'm suffering. Like, come on. I'm waiting for you, you know? And so he's like, dude, I'm sorry, man. He's like, I didn't know what was going on. And I'm like, bro, I've been crawling here telling you to kill it. Like, no axis deer on earth is going to lay there and watch you sneak up. And he's like, I thought I did a good job. So he ends up killing it. And we take a couple pictures. I actually have the pictures. And it's funny because I'm just like, you know, like trying to smile. And you can tell I'm in horrible pain. And Ryan's like,
you got to send those photos, man. I want to see that.
Yeah, I'll have to. And so he's all excited. We're excited. It's a funny thing, actually, because that deer that's our first hunt together. That was the first of 5 animals that me and him have killed together.
Really?
5 animals. Yeah. I have 4 other stories that are crazy, that are him and me, where I'll shoot a deer and it'll come over to him and he'll end up killing it anyway. It ended up being 5 animals in like 5 hunts. I mean, the one this year, remember, that he almost got, that he couldn't get drawn back on. So it's become a very common thing for me and Ryan. He'll kill my animals, I'll kill his animals. Apparently we can't finish them alone. But
that sounds like a good hunting buddy, right?
Yeah.
Getting the job done together.
Yeah. So I'm laying there and I'm like, Ryan, I'm hurt, dude. I think my femur's broken. And I says, I need help. And he says, okay, let me go get help. It's the night hunt. So it just had barely started getting dark. About 30 minutes of light left. He's like, I'll run and get help. And I'm like, don't leave me, bro. Like, don't leave me. He's like, I remember him like kicking me off. Like, dude, I'll be back. I'm not going to leave you. And I'm like, all right. So he takes off and I'm laying out there again. You know, Hawaii, there's no predators.
Yeah.
There's the chupacabra, we think, which we've seen a few times, where, you know, see these little eyes that follow you, and we don't know what it is necessarily. Yeah, Ryan says it's a cat, but I think it's a chupacabra. So, but when you're out there laying in the dirt and you're injured and you have a dead animal, you know, 10 yards from you, your mind just starts going, you know, and you're like, man, this is creepy. The sun sets, it gets dark, and I'm like, dude, it should not take an hour to go get help, you know, like it shouldn't. Yeah. So I'm thinking, oh, Ryan forgot about me or something, you know, and So I'm laying out there, and it's pitch black now. I'm laying out in this field, and I can see like the little light glow of headlights kind of hitting the trees, and I'm like, oh, here comes help, you know, here they come. And I'm like, they're not gonna find me. So I remember grabbing a Luminoc and popping it, and I'm over there just waving it, you know, waving my Luminoc, you know, like here I am, like a flare, you know.
Yeah.
And I remember they couldn't get all the way up to me. They got about 100 yards from me, and they just couldn't come any further because of the terrain. And I remember the truck stops, and the dust kind of goes around it. And again, I'm tipped up, you know, waving my little knock, looking, trying to see, and I see the dust kind of come around the front of the headlights, and I see this giant of a man walk out of the headlights through the cloud of dust, you know, and I'm like, hello? It's Brandon Lilly, and he's all,
Yeah.
Rick? And I'm like, over here, Brandon. And he's like, I'm coming, Rick. And
What a beautiful moment.
oh, dude, I just remember, like, I literally had like tears in my eyes,
Yeah.
like, you know, like, oh, you know, it's safe, everything's gonna be fine, you know. Here comes Brandon. He comes over, and I'm like, Brandon, I can't walk, bro. I'm injured horribly. It's a bad injury. It's my leg. And he's written books and stuff. I mean, he's you know, been in this world forever. And he like grabs my leg, and he's like, where does it hurt? What happened? And he's like, that's a stage 2, you know, hamstring pull or something. I'm like, he's like, in 2 weeks you'll be good to go. And I'm like, are you sure? And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, all right. So he picks me up. My dude, I can't walk. I'm freaking hurt. I can't move. And so he picks me up like you carry your wife, you know, over the threshold.
Yeah. It takes a big
And
man to pick up
yeah,
someone
and I've got my
yours or
arm
my
around his
size.
neck, you know, and I'm just like, I was so scared, Brandon. I'm like, Ryan wasn't doing anything to help. He shushed me like 17 times. I'm like, I've been out here and I'm just like feeling my guts to him. Like, it was so scary. I know there's no predators, but I still was scared. And Brandon's like, it's all right, Rick. I got you.
Oh,
And
man.
it carries me up to the truck. And I get up to the truck, and all I hear is laughing, you know, like hysterical laughing. And I'm like, what's going on? And they're like, oh my hell, Rick, you little pansy. Brandon lowers me into the truck. And from their side, Brandon's like, yeah, we're sitting in the truck, like freaking Rick out here, hurts himself running like an old fool. They're like, we send Brandon out to go grab him, and we look, and through their cloud of dust, they see Brandon come carrying me in
A
their
war
arms.
movie.
They're like, your head's like buried in his neck, and you're just like, you know, I have like mud dried tears down my face apparently, because I had been crying. I'm not gonna lie, so I had been crying at a few different points, and the red dirt had stuck to my tears. So that I come out of the cloud, and then Brandon's carrying me like this macho man, and I'm just like bearing my, you know, soul to him.
That's
And
so great.
so yeah, that's the other side of it. But yeah, man, that just a funny story. It ended up, like I said, I got home a couple weeks later. It was the hamstring. It's still actually, you know, I still can feel that injury years later. That's I think what's funny when you get 40. It's not bad, but I don't just take off sprinting anymore, you know, things like that. But yeah, man, just a funny, you know, we talk about it all the time. We always tell about it, and you heard it, you know, up in Hawaii, and just funny,
Yeah.
man.
That's such a great story, man. I love since you told me that the first time, I've just found myself like sitting there thinking about it and laughing on my own because I'm like, God, I can't. Like you're such a big guy to see you just get carried out
Oh,
of
dude.
the Hawaiian bush just by Brandon Lilly. Just such a funny image.
Yeah.
man. You do a great job like making it easy to picture.
Yeah. I remember it very well, man. It was very traumatizing at the time. We ended up getting the buck. First deer I ever killed out there. It wasn't a monster, but it's a trophy for me for sure, you know. And again, like I
Absolutely.
said, it's the story that goes with it. But yeah, man, I'll never forget that. And that's for me what hunting is about, you know, those moments. You know, this was a guy that I had met. I remember picking him up at the airport. They're like, hey, will you go get Brandon at the airport? And I'm like, how will I know who he is? And they're like, oh, you'll know. And I'm like, okay, what is that? And they're like, he's a giant and he's tattooed. And I'm like, all right. I go pulling in, and I'm like, whoa, you know, like you're a scary dude, you know.
Yeah.
And never met before, never spoken. 5 days later, he's carrying me out, you know, of the field. in his arms. And I'm just like, oh, I'm so scared, Brandon. And I heard your voice and I was like, it's going to be all right. And I says, I knew it would be you, Brandon. I knew you were the one who was going to come through that cloud. I remember looking over there thinking, I hope it's not Ryan because he can't carry me. He'll be like, get up, you pansy. You can walk. And I'll be like, I can't ride. And he'll shush me. And I says, I was so glad, but it was you who walked through that cloud because I knew you would be compassionate and you would carry me. And he's like, I got you, Rick. He's a man of few words, man, but he's
that's too good, man.
he's a good dude. But yeah, it was funny, man.
That's good. I'll share a story. Mine's not nearly as good as yours, but it's one that makes me laugh every time. And people who've heard my podcast before have probably heard me tell this a couple times. But it was actually my first archery kill, and it was in Texas. So I have a buddy, and he's like, yeah, I work on this property. There's turkeys all over it. We're allowed to hunt it. No one hunts turkeys. Everybody just hunts deer. And I'm like, well, let's go out there. I was like, I got some decoys, a little blind. Like, let's go. He brings his shotgun, and I bring my bow. But I should have known the day was going to be weird when it started. Because remember, this is where he works. So he calls me at like 4 a.m. as I'm sitting at the gate waiting to get into the property. And he's like, bro, where are you? And I'm like, oh, well, I'm at the address you gave me. He's like, I'm lost. I'm like, what do you mean you're lost? You work here. Like this, this is where you go every day. Like, how are you lost?
Yeah.
He's like, I don't know, man. And what's funny is the pin he sent me was the wrong way. But he also gave me the address. So he gave me the wrong place and he maybe went to his own pin. I don't know what he did. But either way, we get there. He opens the gate. We go inside. And I've never heard anything like this. There's turkeys everywhere, just gobbling in every single direction on every tree. And I'm like, oh, man, it's going to be a good day. So there's one feeder. Again, it's not really a hunting property. It's like it's a construction property, and they're basically on the river, so that's where all the turkeys are. So we go to the one spot. I set up my little blind, which is basically like a 8-foot by 2-foot piece of cloth with like 3 poles, so just sort of putting it in front of us. And this is the very beginning of COVID, too. So we don't know what we don't know. I'm like, all right, you sit 6 feet over that way, I guess. I don't know. We're outside. Who cares?
Neither one of you turkey hunted?
No, we hadn't. Well, actually, that's not true. I had killed a turkey in Colorado with my shotgun. So I set up some decoys. Yeah, and that was it. So just this is my second turkey hunt, but he's thinking I'm some kind of expert, right?
Yeah.
So I put up some decoys and we sit there and just nothing happens. And we sit there for hours. And I'm like, what the hell? Like, I've never been around more birds in my life. Like, how did not one bird come into this? And so we're like, all right, let's walk the property. Like, this is dumb. We're running out of time. Let's just go walk around. So we're walking around a little bit, and then we end up getting back to the trucks. And this truck pulls in with some workers, some Mexican gentlemen, and they're like, yeah, there's some turkeys back there. And we're like, no, that's our decoys. And they're like, no, there's a turkey there. And we're like, there's a turkey there? Run around the corner so we could see probably 400 yards to the decoys, and there is a tom strutting right in the middle of our decoys. And I'm like, well, what are the odds of that? And I'm like, you guys just drove right by and he didn't move? He's like, yeah, we just drove right by. He didn't care. And I'm like, all right. So I go to my buddy. I'm like, here's the plan. We're going to drive right by. I'm going to sit in the back of your truck. And when we get there, stop, and I'll let her rip. And we'll drop this turkey. It'll be great. And he's like, okay, got it. So he gets in the car. I get in the back. We start driving. We're right about there. We're coming up right to the turkey, and I'm getting ready to pull back. And we drive right past the turkey. And we just keep going. And I'm like, where the hell are you going? I'm like, what's happening? And so he pulls around, and there's this like berm that we were using as like a backdrop for us. And he pulls right around to the back side of it. And I'm like, what did you do this for? Like, this is the only place I can't shoot that turkey from. And he's like, oh, whatever. So the turkey jumps this little barbed wire fence and runs into this woods. And when that happens, those 3 Mexican guys come flying in on their truck. And one of them drives off. 3 of them jump out, and they run into the woods after the turkey. And I'm like, what is going on here? Like, what is happening? And I'm like, all right, well, I guess let's follow these guys and go get that turkey. So we go into the woods. We never see one of them again. Like, they just disappear. I don't know if like the truck drove to the other side of the property. They just ran through and jumped in, but we didn't ask them to do that. They just ran into the woods. So we go into the woods and we're like, well, this is dumb. This is like, we see some deer in there, but we don't see any turkeys. I'm got my slate calls and trying to get something, but nothing's happening. I'm like, all right, well, let's go back to the decoys, sit down and talk about what's going on here. So we sit down.
Let's see where we went wrong.
Yeah. And I'm like, all right, man, well, I have to go. I was like, and he's like, well, I have to work because it's still early, right? And he's like, but can I keep this stuff and I'll hunt this evening? And I'm like, yeah, of course. I was like, before I go, I always like to throw out a call, and this has actually worked twice for me. Like, I'm quitting, I'm gonna throw one call out, see what happens. And so, throw out a little slate call, and basically where we're parked over at the main construction site, a big old Tom comes tumbling down the road, and I'm like, well, holy, like 300 yards out, and I'm just calling, and I'm calling, and so I'm like, all right, I give the slate call to my buddy. I just can't mouth call. I don't know why I can't. I just can't do it. So I'm like, here, you do this. I was like, when I draw back, be ready to use your shotgun, because I was like, I don't know if I'm gonna hit it. If I miss, shoot it with a shotgun, right?
Yeah.
So like,
for sure.
let's take this bird
Back
down.
each other up. Yeah.
Exactly. So I call it in to 20 yards. It's right at this decoy. It gets its head behind like one of the railings of the feeder. So I'm like, all right, I think I got this. So I pull back, and my arrow unknocks itself. So it's hanging there, and then my arrow is pointed straight up, and so I'm full draw, and I'm looking at my buddy, and I shoot lefty, so he's behind me. I'm just like, psst.
Put my arrow on.
I'm like, he's like, what? I'm like, your arrow's unknocked. So he belly crawls behind my little thing over to me, grabs my arrow, puts it on my string,
That's awesome.
and then he looks at the turkey, but he never lets go of my arrow, and I'm like, go. I'm like, you let go of my arrow, and he's like, oh yeah. So he let go of the arrow. I let her rip. And not a good shot, but the turkey, when it heard the noise, head went up, body went down, and snipped its head, just like took the head clean off.
Oh,
So
perfect.
super clean kill. Bird
Yeah.
went down, and I was like, "Holy crap, what a day!" Like
That
I just got, and it was it was the biggest turkey I've ever shot. Huge bird. It was a ton of fun. And then again, with just a little ending to the story, when he went out, he took all my gear. He did something that I don't even know if you can do anywhere else, but he killed 3 turkeys with 2 shots. And they were all toms, but legal. But like in Texas, you get like 5 turkey tags or something like that when you buy a
2
license.
for 1.
So yeah, there were 3 birds in there, and he killed 2 of them, and the third one didn't run away, so he shot again and killed 3 turkeys in like 5 seconds.
Oh my gosh.
So it was just a crazy day, man.
Dude,
and it's
that
just
is
one of those hunts.
insane.
My first ever archery kill, and like literally from him getting lost going to work to like the truck full of Mexicans disappearing into the woods, my arrow not being on the knock. It's just like everything
Dude,
went
that
wrong,
is
and somehow it
awesome.
still worked out.
That's funny that I've had that happen a ton of times where your arrow pops off the string, and it's like to have him there and have him reach around and flip it back on. Like, that's so funny that you would think to do that, and not let down, it's like, hey, just pin it back on.
I didn't think of
That's
anything
funny.
else. I didn't
That's
think about
funny,
like
dude.
putting it
Yeah.
down. But yeah,
Yeah,
and what's the fact that he didn't let go of the arrow. I'm always like,
yeah.
what were you thinking, man? I'll break your finger.
Good job. Yeah. I had a buddy of mine one time. I was helping him. I was out shooting a target, like again, 15 years ago at my business. And my buddy Cody McCann comes over and he says, "Hey, can I try shooting that bow? I've never shot a bow before, And I'm like, "Yeah, sure. If you've never done it, let's let you shoot an arrow." And he grabs it and he pulls it and he puts the string behind his head and is looking down the arrow. And the string is right down the back of his head. And I says, "Cody, stop.
Yep.
Don't let go." And he's like, "What?" And I'm like, "Don't." He's like, "How do I aim?" And I'm like, "Stop. Don't let go. Hold on." And I go over there and I grab the bow with full draw. And I'm like, "Pull your head out." He pulls his head out and I like let it down. And I'm like, "Okay, we need to go over the basics."
Yep.
But it's like, man, you can get into, some pretty crazy situations.
I had a friend, exact same thing, where he pulls my bow back and it goes behind his ear, the string. And I'm like, no. I was like, whatever you do not shoot. I was like, keep that off. I was like, get your ear out of there. It'll rip your ear off.
Yeah.
Same thing. And that's when I was like, I'm never going to let anyone shoot my bow again. Like, it's not a traditional bow that anyone can just pull back and shoot.
Yeah.
It's fit for me.
Yeah.
And when he pulled back and hit that wall, it was 4 inches too long for him.
Yeah.
So.
And that's exactly, you heard Ryan talking. I was telling that story in Hawaii about that. And Ryan says, yeah, because he hasn't been bow hunting long, like 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
And when he first got into it, he says, I'm just going to go get into it. Went down, found a buddy or somebody with a bow, or I don't know where he went, but he says the guy handed him the bow and says, yeah, take a shot. And he says, I just grabbed the bow and I was like, bing, shot it. And he says, I shot missed the target. And the guy says, I don't know what's going on. Try again, shoot again. And he says, fing, and shot an arrow the other way. And the guy says, he's like, what pin are you using? And Ryan's like, pin? I don't know what you're talking about. Pulling back and shooting. And the guy's like, okay. let's slow this down. This is your peep. Those are pins. And Ryan's like, that a lot of people think that that's common sense, but Ryan says, I was just pulling back and like, so I shot an arrow into the trees, and then I pulled back and shot one into the grass, and the guy's like, what pin are you using? He's like, pin?
That's too good, man.
Yeah.
I can see Ryan doing that.
Yeah. I think he still does that.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to. I haven't told this to my podcast folks, and I don't know if you want to hear, but I wanted to tell the story about the axis deer that I shot in Molokai, the actual
Absolutely.
buck.
Yeah.
And then if you want to share any more, we can. I'll listen to stories as long as you want, Rick.
Yeah. No, go ahead. Let's hear yours. I love this one.
All right. So I'll skip the part where I kind of found that water trough the first time I was there, and there was 200 deer, and I thought there was like 10. I just spooked all of them. But the next morning, I'm like, I'm going back there. That's what I'm gonna do. I get in there and I spook deer like right off the bat, right? So
Did it make
like,
you nervous to walk over there in the dark at all in Hawaii, or did it not at all?
No, not at all.
Because there's no predator. I was just wondering where you said you don't like being out there. If that was
no, Hawaii was the first time. Yeah, it was the first time I've ever been pretty comfortable with it.
There's no snakes. There's nothing that is gonna hurt you.
Yeah.
So it kind of
it's a road, right?
It's a road.
Like when I'm hunting out here in the Rockies of Colorado, it's like I'm just jumping logs. I'm trying not to fall.
Yeah.
We're seeing Starlink satellites and thinking they're aliens. Like there's tons of scary stuff out here, but in Hawaii, it wasn't too much of an issue for me. But yeah, I get out there, and of course, after being caught by the guide, right? They pulled up in the truck behind me, which we were trying to kind of avoid. But either way, it worked out just fine. And I spooked these deer. So I get to the spot that I was thinking, and I'm sitting there, standing next to this tree, thinking this is the only spot where there'll be shade, but it's 50 yards to that water trough. And for the listeners, the water trough's what, 16 feet long, 3.5 feet wide, 3 feet tall, concrete,
wrapped in three sides on bushes.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm sitting there, and I'm like, you know what? There's a spot maybe 10 yards in front of me. I'm going to check that out. And I just sort of scoot forward a little bit, and it's just the perfect spot. It's a horseshoe of bushes that are about 3 feet tall. I sit my bow down, and I just sit there, very comfortable, completely concealed from almost every direction. I can see through it enough so I can see deer, and if I get on my knees, I can shoot right over. So I'm like, this is perfect. And I hadn't had anything since that first arrow, right? Said that I shot short on, and I was like, I hope I get an opportunity because I really blew it. I'm still like in my own head about how awful I am at hunting, which can happen. Either way, so
I didn't realize that was your second arrow.
I thought you shot. I had fired some more, maybe. I don't remember if you're right. Actually, I had been to the broken pipe, and I had fired a bunch of arrows and lost them all, but they were all over 60 yards. So I was like, I have no chance. So you're right.
Those don't count. Those don't count.
Yeah. But yeah, I'm sitting there, and a buck walks in, but he comes to the far side of the trough, and I'm like, his body is completely concealed by the concrete. I'm like, well, I can't shoot him.
So I know where your blind was. He came from. If you're come out of your blind and looking at the blind, he came from the right side, like around.
So I'm not sure.
Not from the canyon side, from the other side.
From the other side, yeah. And you know how they just appear, right? So I don't know
That's
exactly.
Weird, yeah, because I didn't have any come. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, he came from the other side, and I just all of a sudden noticed he was there drinking, and I'm like, oh, okay. So I sit there and I'm waiting, and he finally steps away, and I go full draw, and he just spooks. But he stops at like maybe 50 yards. I let an arrow rip, nothing. And I'm like, God, this is hard. These are such crazy creatures. And I'm like, that sucks. And so I set my bow back down, and I'm like, maybe I should go get my arrow. I don't know if the luminoc will spook anything. And I'm like, just sitting there. And 5 minutes later, I see a doe. And I'm like, oh, well, who knows? Maybe I got another shot here. And so I sit up, and I realize that the doe's there as well as another buck and a fawn. And I'm like, oh, okay, there's a couple deer here. This buck is kind of playing around, but he ends up drinking on the other side of the trough. So now I can see his body. He's quartering away, and he's just head down. And I'm like, well, this is actually not the other side of the trough. He's at the front of the trough. So he's quartering away.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Yeah. Same thing. Shot. But I'm like, this is great. And his head's in the trough. So I just get up. The doe and the fawn spook, and the buck doesn't move an inch. And so I just let it rip, and it just goes perfectly right behind the shoulder blade. I hear a large thwack. I'm like, I don't know if that was a shoulder blade on the opposite side. I don't know if that was the concrete.
Yeah, the trough
or what it was. But I'm like, I did it. Hit an animal with my bow. Like, this is so exciting. He didn't even take a step. He didn't run over here and slap me like the last couple did.
Right.
So he runs off. I see the arrow flopping around inside of him, and I see it shoot up. It goes 20 feet in the air and then lands. And I'm like, yes. And that's when I text you guys, and I'm like, guys, I hit one. Like, I hit a buck. And everyone's like, woo. I'm like, this is the best day ever. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm gonna give it 30 minutes before I go. I know I hit him really clean. About 25 minutes, I'm like, nope, I'm giving him 25 minutes. So I start walking. I'm like, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go look for the multiple arrows that I've lost in this area, because the day before I had thrown a couple. And so I'm like, just get out of my spot, cross that little dirt road, go into that little open field, and I'm walking to where I shot my arrow earlier, and there's another buck. But like, that brush is like 4 feet tall, right? That's about how tall these deer are. So all I see is antlers, and I hear the loud bark, and he just starts hopping like a mule deer out of there and just going crazy. And I'm like, oh man. And he was just as good as my buck, if not bigger. And I'm like, holy crap, maybe I shouldn't be doing this. Let's just start looking for my arrow. Like, not these other arrows. Let's just find the one that I know should have blood on it. I can't find it, like, to save my life. And I'm like, I don't see any blood. I don't see my arrow. Like, that doesn't make any sense. The end of my arrow is glowing. Like, what's going on here?
Yeah.
And I'm texting you, and you're like, oh, they don't bleed much, man. They don't bleed much.
Don't,
and I'm like,
man, they don't.
Shit. And I was like, did I hit his front shoulder blade? Now I'm starting, the doubts in my head. And I'm like, I screwed this up. Now I've injured this beautiful, beautiful buck. And eventually I finally found it. I like walk to where I know he ran off to, and then I look back and I finally see a little bit of red light. And so I go and I find my arrow, and there's blood on the fletchings, but not a lot. And I'm like, oh no, like maybe it didn't penetrate at all. I pick the arrow up and I turn it over, and the backside's covered in blood. And I'm like, okay, all right, we're in business. And everything there is green and red. Everything is green and red.
So hard, yeah.
And so I'm just looking at where I found the arrow, and I'm like, let me find a drop of blood. I know he ran this direction, so I find a drop. And then I point myself where he ran, and I find another drop. And I just slowly we're talking pinpoint drops of blood.
Yeah.
Nothing big.
I read an article that said that they think because they're dehydrated, it's always, they just don't have a lot of blood in them. Like they get over here in the States where they have access to a lot more water, but they just don't bleed, man.
Yeah, it was crazy. I mean, we're talking tiny drop. I'm seeing a little bit on a branch here, a little bit there. And I'm like, well, I know he ran this way. I was like, I have to assume he stayed on this game trail until I can't find any blood, and then I'll figure it out. So I just track him. He made it 50 yards. So I was shot with a sever, which has a 2-inch cut radius. So He made it almost nowhere at all. And he just plopped right over. And I've never been more happy in my life.
Isn't that the best feeling when you look and you're like, it's just an unbelievable feeling to walk up on an animal like that. I know what you feel, and it's just amazing. Especially like that. I think it was a monster.
And especially after if the doubt has time to creep in, if you have that doubt and then you do find it, oh my God.
Yep.
But here's what's crazy. So I take a couple photos. I prop my phone up on my bow and take the photos that I can and some videos, and I'm texting you guys and getting all the congratulations, cheers back, text messages, and I'm on cloud 9. And you know me, I'm a big fan of instrumental music. All weekend I was putting my phone on for instrumental Hawaiian music. So I'm just like, I'm going to process this deer. I don't care what else comes in. So I just put on my instrumental Hawaiian music. I'm on the top of the mountain. I could see the ocean in every direction.
Yeah.
And I'm just sitting there, and I start processing the deer. And I'm not kidding you. Every like 10 minutes, I stand up just to like stretch my back, stretched out, and there's more deer at the damn feeder 50 yards away. And I'm like, this is the craziest thing I've ever done in my life.
Yeah.
But I get that thing processed, and at this point, it's like 8 a.m., I think. And I start the hike back, and I'm like, oh, I ran out of water. And it was hot. It was real hot. And I texted you guys, like, please, someone run down the road with a bottle of water. And Ryan Mickler did just that. He met me about halfway. And, man, it was a hunt of a lifetime, man. Yeah, I can't thank you enough for letting me come along, because it was a ton of fun. And eventually I'll get that deer measured, and we'll figure out how big he was. But he was pretty big. Did anyone the next week get one bigger?
I don't know, honestly. I mean, we didn't have a way to measure them. And so I don't know what my dad's was like, I think we were measuring with like fingers, just kind of doing the whole, but
yeah.
I don't know exactly anybody's measurements. So let me know what yours is, and then I'll find out what theirs all are, and we'll see. But they were all very similar. I think yours was heavier. My dad's was wider than all the ones I've ever seen, and his top points were really long. They have like I said, they got one over there, those little points, right?
Yeah.
There. So Yeah, but they were, I mean, I would have shot any one of them, you know, in a heartbeat, wouldn't even have hesitated. So they were all
Yeah,
beautiful, beautiful bucks.
absolutely, man. It was fun. I got into all sorts of bucks that entire trip. I even called that one in, which was unexpected. I
Yeah.
got to 10 feet. Yeah, I called him across a canyon, and I have no cover. I'm just sitting next to a rock, just kind of like trying to look like a rock. And he just walked right up to me, and he didn't win me. He just didn't like the look of me as a rock. Apparently, I didn't have a
Yeah.
very good impression.
Right.
But yeah, and then there's the
That's
end of the whole
amazing.
trip, right? Where like I get to the airport 30 minutes before my flight, and they're like, "Oh yeah, you can't take that head with you." And I'm like,
Yeah. I didn't know
"What?"
that. Yeah. I didn't know that was a thing.
Yeah. So that was stressful trying to find someone to come pick up because you guys had already left and you were on some hike. You're like, "We'll be back in a couple hours."
We got your message. We all got back into town and it's like bing, 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 bing. And we're like, oh, we got to go to the airport. Oh, wait, no, we don't. Oh, wait. Yes, we do. Wait. Oh, and we're like all reading it together. And I'm like, oh, who has it? You know, and it's funny
Yeah.
because Ryan's like, did you just get a text from Michael? And I'm like, yeah, something's coming in. And then we're reading through it and it's like, you know, 8 texts and it's like, hey, I can't take it. Come get it. Wait a minute.
Yeah.
Who's getting it? You know, and I'm like, oh. So yeah, I'm glad it
Yeah.
worked out.
It was
They're gonna get
stressful,
it.
but it was fun. It was like being a celebrity there with that head.
Yeah.
Everyone that's native to the island was like, "Brah,
Oh, that's
that's a hell of
cool.
a deer, brah." And
Yeah,
like everybody
especially
wanted
the
to hear the
bow.
story.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you tell me you
So
got it with a bow. You know, we run into a lot of people on the island, and they're like, "Oh, you're hunting?" We're like, "Yeah." And they're like, "Oh, good for you." And we're like, "Yeah, do you have any?" We're like, "Yeah, we've shot 5, you know, whatever, 6 today, you know, this so far." And they're like, "Oh, that's good," you know. And we're like, "Yeah, it's with bows." And they're like, "Whoa!" Every time
yeah.
they're like, "That is." There, you know, I had the fishing game guy. Were you there when we were talking to the fishing game guy?
Yeah, yeah, he's
He's
actually the person that put me on that trough. He was like, "That's where you go. That's where they're
oh
gonna
yeah,
be."
yeah,
And
yeah.
so that's why I was like, "I'll check it out."
Yeah, and so he says, you know, people who come with guns are sportsmen, but those who come with bows are hunters. You know, he says
Yep.
that's the true hunter. You know.
Yep.
So yeah, man, that's a like I said, you know, hopefully it's not a once in a lifetime. I hear people say that, you know, and I know what it means that it's just that high of a memory and that big of a deal, and I understand that, but hopefully, you know, I always tell people, you know, it's my 4th year on a trip of a lifetime. You know,
Yeah.
and hopefully we keep
Yep.
doing it, you know. And so I'll let you know when we start planning that and what that's going to look like, and see if you want to come back.
Yeah, man. I would love to. I just got to convince the wife. That's
Yeah,
all there is
yeah,
to it.
that's the hard part. Yeah,
Well, man, this has been a lot of fun. Do you want to tell any
yeah.
more stories, or
I
we
think
want to
I'm
wrap
good,
this
man. I
thing
think,
up?
you know, we could do it again. Let's say probably another few months. Let's just jump on again and do another one. And
Hell yeah.
you know, I've got plenty, and I'm sure you got plenty. I don't even
Yes,
know what's our
sir.
time at, Ricky. Where does it say? Do you even know, Michael?
I think we're about an hour in.
Hour in or something? Yeah,
No, hour 20 maybe. It's
yeah.
yeah.
I think we're good, man. I think we got some good stuff. I'll you know, I think we're good to just wrap it up, and I'll do my outro and intro hereafter, and we'll throw it up, you know, here in the next couple weeks.
Yeah, sounds good, brother. Well, thanks for
Appreciate
having
your
me on
time,
there.
man.
It was
Great to
it was a
know
lot of
you.
fun.
It was,
Yeah.
man. Let me know on Texas on the Odd Ad. I'd love to come do that. Let me know if we can put that together and make it happen.
Yeah, yeah. I've already talked to John about it, and he's down. He's like, come anytime. So he did just open that bow shop, so we've got to kind of figure that stuff. He's got to make sure that that's manageable because right now he's short on Botex. But
Okay.
beyond that, we can go whenever. We just don't want to go in the summertime because it would be
Okay.
miserable.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I go to Alaska and then Africa. So maybe after Africa, that's in August. So September, October. Well, I'll just get with you and see.
okay, yeah. So, well, I got my August. I got an antelope tag. September
You got a
moose.
moose tag.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm hunting that in September. If you want to come, I'm looking for someone to just come with me, like my
Yeah.
wife prefers.
So yeah, send me the dates and let me know what the dates are, and I'll see if I can swing it. I've got
Cool,
an
man.
elk
All right.
tag in I've got an elk tag in October, a deer tag in September. But we'll just see. Let's just play it by ear and see what we can make happen. I'd love to
Sounds
come
good,
out.
brother.
Okay, man.
Yeah, man.
Nice chatting with you.